Tel Aviv, Friday, June 13th, 2025, 2:17 a.m. David is sitting in the kitchen. He's poured himself mint and chamomile tea because once again, he can't sleep. He's had insomnia for years, ever since his wife, a nurse, was killed in 2021 in a rocket strike on Ashkelon. Suddenly, a quick flicker of light. 1 second blackout. Then the sound every person in this country knows by heart. Tseva Adam. Tseva Adam. Red alert. David no longer asks what's happening. He only asks, will the dome make it in time this round? His 7-year-old son Amit is already standing in the doorway. He isn't crying. He isn't panicking. He knows what to do. They taught him this in kindergarten. Right hand on dad, left hand on his head, and full sprint to the shelter. They step into the small room. Inside, blankets, water, a small flashlight, a power bank, a Torah, and a tablet with Minecraft. This is what religion and survival look like now. 5 seconds later comes the first boom. No one knows if it's an interception or impact. Then a second one. Closer, they sit in silence. David looks at his son. He isn't thinking about whether they survive. He's thinking, did the system mark our address as important? Does the dome even see us? At 2:24, the system stops sending alerts. Silence. But not relief. Silence in Tel Aviv is the worst sound of all. 10 minutes later, they leave the shelter. In the distance, the office district is smoking. Someone's screaming. Over the sea, you can see ambulance lights. The media are already typing. The system worked in 90% of cases. A success. David isn't sure it's a success. Because for him, that 10% is a different question. Am I a statistic? And his son asks, Dad, will Iron Dome ever get tired? Hey, we live in a time when the decision over your life is made in a fraction of a second. Not in Parliament, not in an army base, in an algorithm. That's what Iron Dome does. A system that doesn't hear a child crying, but calculates whether it's worth firing a missile worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to save the roof over your head. In Israel, that's daily life. While the world sleeps, the sky here is running threat analysis. On June 13th, 2025, around 2 in the morning, Israel once again stood face to face with this new reality. Rockets from Iran, drones from Lebanon, support fire from Syria, hundreds of projectiles in the span of an hour. The system worked. But as one Tel Aviv resident said afterwards, this time the sky didn't defend itself. This time it went dark. Because despite a success rate of around 90%, despite praise from Washington, despite state-of-the-art radar, a few rockets made it through. And they hit places that were never supposed to be hit. A kindergarten in Holon, a local IDF logistics command facility, part of the office district in Tel Aviv. So, what went wrong? Or maybe the better question is, what is working exactly as it was programmed to? This episode won't just tell you about technology. It's about a society that learned to love a system before it really understood what that system is. About parents who no longer believe politicians, but still believe the app. About children who don't ask, what are we playing today? But, where's the alarm today? About a culture that turns a Tamar interceptor missile into a cartoon hero. But also about a question no one wants to say out loud. Is Iron Dome really a defensive system? Or is it an electronic placebo that just delays the moment we look up at the sky in fear again? Buckle up. Let's begin. Because today's war is no longer just about life and death. It's about something more. Whether we can still trust, not just the machine, but ourselves. Iron Dome, Kippot Barzel in Hebrew, is more than a missile defense system. It's a psychological prosthesis, a concrete electronic sky that gives people the feeling they can sleep. But can they, really? Because the dome doesn't stop fear, it just filters panic. When the world talks about Israel, it talks about Netanyahu, Gaza, Iran, election campaigns. We're going to show you something else. We'll show you a system born from fear, urgency, necessity, and genius. We'll show you how a near-bankrupt startup in Petach Tikva created a solution that neither the army nor politicians wanted. A solution that now protects entire cities. We'll show you how the decision over life and death is no longer made by a general, but by a machine. How the dome learned to tell real threat from noise. How it calculates whether a rocket will hit a field or a kindergarten, and decides whether to intercept. But we'll also ask the questions no one likes to ask. What if the system is wrong? What if the enemy isn't the rocket, but overload? What if Iron Dome isn't a shield, but a mirror, showing how terrified we are of looking up? This won't be a story about hardware. It's a story about a society living with its finger on the trigger, outsourced to AI. Buckle up. We're starting. The rocket is already in the air. How did Iron Dome get forced into existence? In 2004, Israel's Ministry of Defense had different priorities. Budgets flowed to F-16, special forces, classified satellite projects. No serious strategist saw Gaza's rockets as a strategic threat. Qassams, primitive, cheap, often made from water pipes and fertilizer. They landed in fields, occasionally hit a roof, but they didn't change policy until they started hitting. Because every rocket, even if inaccurate, has one advantage: statistics. Sooner or later, it hits something that matters. And when that happens, it's not just a person who dies. Trust dies. Trust in the state, in the army, in the idea of safety. Israeli generals didn't want a missile defense project. They argued that intercepting a single Qassam for about $50,000 was totally disproportional. The Qassam itself cost a few $dozen. It was math, not strategy. But people in Sderot and Ashkelon didn't live in spreadsheets. They said, "We don't care what it costs. We care that our kids can fall asleep without counting the seconds to the next alarm." Then came pressure from mayors, then from media, then from politicians. And suddenly, the system nobody wanted became a political must. Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, the state weapons giant, was given the task: solve it. But they didn't actually have the key. A small group of engineers in Petach Tikva did. A private subcontractor with experience in game simulations and telemetry systems. To the military, they were nobodies. To the future, everything. They made a proposal that flipped the logic. Don't shoot down every rocket, only the ones heading toward populated areas. That was the game changer. A system with built-in prioritization, not target-aligned fire, but is it worth it? Iron Dome isn't just the Tamer interceptor. It's primarily software. An algorithm that, in milliseconds, analyses a rocket's flight, trajectory, speed, impact point, and potential casualties, and then decides. If the rocket is heading toward an empty field, the system does nothing. If it's heading toward a city, it fires. In theory, simple. In practice, it's like a sniper having to hit a bullet in the dark with another bullet. And all this without human input. There is no time for a person to think. In 2007, the system was still a prototype. In 2008, it had its first tests. In 2011, it intercepted its first rocket in combat. Since then, the numbers climbed into the thousands. But the same questions kept coming back. Is this economically sustainable? Aren't we giving the enemy a reason to fire more? Are we making society dependent on an illusion of safety? Politicians had a simpler answer. If Iron Dome can save one child, we don't ask what it costs. And society? They fell in love with a system they didn't understand. A system with one clear advantage. It worked. How did Iron Dome reshape an entire nation's mind? Not everyone in Israel knows all the president's names, but everyone knows the sound of the Tseva Adam alarm. That's not a metaphor. It's a sound you learn to recognize before the alphabet. From kindergarten, from the playground, from the crib. Iron Dome didn't just intercept rockets, it intercepted minds. In a decade, it created a new type of citizen psychology. A person who trusts technology deeply, but lives with an equally deep anxiety. Israelis are not afraid of rockets. They're afraid the system might not catch them in time. Children born after 2010 don't remember life without Iron Dome. It's background noise. Just as grandparents once built shelters in basements, today their grandkids have apps that tell them how many seconds they have to run. Parents joke about it. Kids learn to sprint before they learn to count. Preschool teachers drill evacuations like choreography. Survival skills become ritual. Ritual becomes normal. Kids play alarm and shelter like other kids play cops and robbers, with one difference. Here, it's not a game. In interviews with teachers and school psychologists, one theme repeats: the death of carefree childhood. Children don't ask if there'll be an alarm. They ask how many. This isn't a one-off trauma. It's permanent stress, built into the school timetable. In social research from the University of Haifa, 72% of respondents say they trust the defense system more than politicians. That's no accident. It's what happens when technology delivers what it promises, unlike people. Psychologists call it transplantation of fear. When you stop fearing the threat itself and start fearing the moment the system doesn't act. Calm doesn't come from feeling safe. It comes from believing the machine will move before you even understand what's happening. The dome turns into a talisman, an electronic amulet of safety. The modern Israeli trusts an interface, an app, a push notification. Not God, not the army, not the prime minister. The repeatability of an algorithm. Iron Dome has become a meme, a brand, ad material, graffiti on walls. My dad is Tamir, after the interceptor missile. On TikTok, kids post videos of perfect shelter run in 3 seconds. There's even a micro-fashion trend, camo backpacks with domed printed on them. At independence parades, you now see kids dressed as Iron Dome operators. In cartoons, a cute animated Tamir is a superhero. On school walls, posters, be as fast as Dome. The system doesn't just protect, it educates. But there's a shadow. PTSD in children, night terrors, constant readiness to run. Therapists talk about dome syndrome, chronic uncertainty wrapped in humor and tech admiration. Child psychiatrists are sounding the alarm. We're raising a generation that doesn't know relaxation, only readiness mode. Iron Dome has become more than a weapon. It's become a national story. That Israel is not only about offense, it's about defense. That it's not about destroying the enemy, it's about protecting your own kids. In election campaigns, politicians compete. More batteries, new units, next-gen AI. Songs, plays, even entertainment shows pick up dome themes. And more you hear the question, is Iron Dome just a system, or already an identity? Can a nation integrate around a defense app? And if yes, what happens when that app stops working? How did the enemy learn to play under the dome? Technology brings advantage, but every advantage is an invitation to work around it. Iron Dome, as precise as a surgeon, did not end the war. It transformed it. From chaotic barrages to a logic puzzle in which the enemy, Hamas, Hezbollah, tests not just Israel, but the system itself. Hamas no longer tries to win by sheer firepower. It tries to win by overload. Instead of one well-aimed rocket, 100 at once. In 2021, in a single night, over 400 projectiles were fired toward Israel. Not to make every hit count, to see when the system starts to lag. These are not just attacks, they're stress tests. Every rocket that gets through, every siren that doesn't sound in time, is feedback. Here's a gap. Hit here next time. On the other side, the system is learning too. AI analyses trajectories, launch points, reaction times. It crunches probabilities. With machine learning, Iron Dome can recognize a new rocket type in fractions of a second. But it's a race. There is no finish line, only new versions. Hamas upgrades from Qassams to improved Grads. Hezbollah experiments with synchronized rocket and drone swarms. Syrian militias probe radar blind spots. In Gaza, 3D printed rocket components are becoming a thing. Hybrid war now has a new layer. Algorithmic optimization. You don't have to punch through the dome. You just need it to fail once. One missed rocket, one glitch, and the entire narrative of safety collapses. That's why the real target isn't only towns or bases. It's expectations. The enemy knows Israelis believe in the system's near perfection. And they know that a single impact, despite the extremely high success rate, can be more traumatic than 10 hits in the pre-dome era. When a rocket is intercepted, the world sees nothing. When one hits, there are headlines, videos, breaking news. So a strategically lucky hit in a sensitive spot has more power than a whole salvo. This is no longer a war over territory. It's a war over perception. And the dome is both a player and a target. In Gaza, every hole in the dome is celebrated. In Tel Aviv, it's analyzed. On CNN and Al Jazeera, the images roll. No AI can intercept those. The dome has become a victim of its own success. Society no longer asks, does the system work? It asks, why didn't it work that one time? That's the paranoia of perfection. A perfect system cannot have a margin of error, because that margin is where people die. Engineers at Rafael work under a pressure few weapons companies know. Their bug reports are written in headlines and funerals. This isn't about performance metrics. It's about whether a child in Ashdod wakes up tomorrow. How did Iron Dome become a geopolitical currency? At first, it was just a national safety net. But once something works so well that it visibly saves lives, it stops being only technology. It becomes currency, desire, leverage. That's how Iron Dome entered the global game. For a long time, the United States watched the project with some distance. But after 2014, Operation Protective Edge and the system's spectacular performance, Washington changed tone. Hundreds of millions of dollars flowed into further development. And then came the question, can we have this too? Israel formally didn't want to export Iron Dome. It was a pillar of sovereignty. But pressure, defense deals, lobbying did their work. In 2020, the U.S. bought 2 full batteries. Officially, for testing. Unofficially, as a shield over high-risk bases. From that moment, Iron Dome started living a second life as an export product. Canada, India, Romania, Azerbaijan, any country that fears rockets takes an interest. And Israel? Israel starts to choose. Because Iron Dome isn't just tech, it's trust. You sell it only to those with whom you want more than a contract. You want a relationship. In 2021, Germany starts talking about buying the Israeli long-range air defense variant. In 2022, Poland signals interest in some components. But there's a catch. Who really controls the code? Iron Dome isn't only launchers and missiles. It's an operating system, real-time decision-making software. And that, Israel never hands over in full. It's like selling a Ferrari but keeping the key. So every export package is a compromise. You get protection, but not full autonomy. You're safer, but still dependent. Exactly as designed. Iron Dome becomes a diplomatic tool. In exchange for votes at the UN, intel cooperation, market access, technology is offered. Sometimes for real, sometimes just as a bargaining chip. In one 2023 leak, Israeli diplomats admit that the Dome offer came up in talks with Saudi Arabia. It was never about actual delivery. It was a signal. We're willing to protect you. If you recognize our role. Then there's another issue. Every buyer expects the same performance as Israel. That's impossible, because success isn't just technology. It's radar networks, experience, logistics, integration with other systems. Iron Dome doesn't work the same in the US. It wouldn't work the same in Eastern Europe. Israel knows this, and that's one reason it can sell the system with a smile. It's not just a weapon, it's a hook. What does the sky look like from inside? Iron Dome was built to stop threats from outside. Rockets that arrive screaming, glowing, exploding. But with every year the system operates, a different question gets louder. Is what hurts us most really coming from outside? Or is it growing inside, in society, in minds, in what no radar can see? The dome has neutralized physical risk, but not psychological risk. According to studies from the Mental Health Institute at Tel Aviv University, around 41% of children in areas under constant siren threat show symptoms of PTSD. Adults aren't much better. Trauma is systemic. Psychiatrists talk about extreme trust syndrome, a paradox where total reliance on technology creates chronic tension. Because if the system works almost always, then the one time it fails hurts 10 times more. Israelis no longer ask, will it work? They ask, will it work for me? For engineers at Rafael, this isn't a project. It's a trembling responsibility, one bug in a line of code. And the consequences are counted not in logs, but obituaries. The dome became more than a weapon. It became a national totem of infallibility. But no tech is infallible. When, in May 2021, a rocket hit a home in Holon despite an active system, the shockwave in society was bigger than after 10 earlier casualties in other conflicts, because this was impossible. And yet it happened. For a moment, the myth cracked, and then it hardened again. Thicker. Psychologists talk about low silence, a state where society functions not in normality, but in suspension, between one alarm and the next. Days without sirens aren't relaxing. They're unsettling. Because something feels off. Where's the alarm? Why isn't it there? This mental state bleeds into relationships, parenting, work culture. The dome generation doesn't plan far ahead. They live in the now, not because they're hedonists, but because they don't believe in long-term plans. The more the system works, the harder it is to imagine life without it. Iron Dome becomes less a shield, more an anchor. Society gets addicted to alerts, apps, machine decisions, which means any outage, even a brief one, becomes a national crisis. In 2023, after a power failure at one southern radar station, the system went offline for 27 minutes. No rockets fell, but the internet exploded. We were left alone, people wrote. Who protects us now? There was no attack. But it was a psychological stress test for the entire nation. For 27 minutes, the sky was empty, the system silent, and people realized something they'd refused to admit. They can no longer imagine life without this machine. Because Iron Dome doesn't just protect, it binds, it builds habit, dependence. Like oxygen, you don't notice it until it's gone. And even though that night no rockets landed, the fear was real. Nothing is more terrifying than the thought that this time, you might be truly on your own. And now, back to David and his son. 6:12 a.m. Sunrise over Tel Aviv. David takes Amit for a walk. They stroll along Rothschild Boulevard. They pass a park where yesterday children rode bikes. Today, shards of glass, a broken bench, a taped-off playground. Further on, the office blocks on Yehuda Halevi Street. One of them housed part of an IDF logistics unit. On the roof, the burn mark of an explosion. Windows blown out, antennas bent, the flag torn. David stops. So does Amit. They don't ask what happened. They know, and they know the system didn't keep up this time. They walk past a cafe where the waitress is putting tables back outside. Life returns, carefully, as if it too senses that the sky is not the same. David says quietly, the system worked, but it wasn't enough. Amit says nothing. He squeezes his hand. In the distance, helicopter noise. On the horizon, smoke. Above them, clear blue sky, but no one believes that's enough anymore. The attack of June 13th, 2025 wasn't the biggest in Israel's history, but it was one of the most psychologically costly. It showed that Iron Dome works brilliantly, but not perfectly. It showed that people trust the system more than politicians, and more than themselves. It showed that too much faith in an algorithm can blind you. The system protected most people, but not everyone. And in a world where security is treated as absolute, most is not enough. This morning, Tel Aviv looked like a city after a storm. But in people's eyes, there was no calm. There was the quiet fear that next time, they will be in that 10%. Did Iron Dome do its job? Technically, yes. Socially, maybe it's no longer enough. If this episode made you think, hit subscribe, leave a like, and share the link. This channel exists to talk about the Middle East from the perspective of people, not just politicians and experts. David, Amit, and thousands like them live in a reality that looks less and less like science fiction, and more like a beta test. Tell me in the comments, would you trust a system that has to choose who to save? Thanks for being here. And now, look up at the sky one more time, and ask yourself, what is it really filtering today? Rockets or fear?